The great church in London of St. Augustine, Kilburn. I started after leaving Milton Abbey to be a freelance musician. Very strange, you know, not to be paying into your teacher's pension fund and things like this. But St. Augustine's, one of the most remarkable buildings in Europe, built in the 19th century. John Loughborough Pearson's masterpiece in Paddington just made avail, and so therefore in the city of Westminster, like my first organ job. The church absolutely is tremendous, and I played there in May for their 150th anniversary. And I've been associated with the church for 40 of those 150 years. So a remarkable instrument, which will be completely restored. They have some hundreds of thousands of pounds stashed away for the restoration of the instrument. And I sincerely hope not what was envisaged once as the completion, which was an instrument of Father Willis in the 1890s. And so music has moved on a touch from there. So the choir stalls and the choir and the high altar, which was enough to lift the spirits of anyone. And this is where many recordings take place. The 16 do many of their recordings here, as do the Tallis Scholars, and numerous orchestras did when the organ could be used. And thus, one of the most spectacular buildings ever in Europe, which is complete, with the vestments, the decorations, all, it's like the Victorian Albert Museum, but working. Next one, there I am, seated one day at the organ, and a good friend of mine up in the north of England, who might be watching, who was in the choir, Mr. Baker, and so therefore this was taken for some publicity pictures for the Netherlands, I think. And so, yes, and you can see just on the back of me, the high altar. And when a service is taking place, it's one of the most amazing places anyone can be part of the liturgy in playing this organ. It's a Harrison console, but it's all behind that, Father Willis. The next. Now this is a strange photograph. And those of you amongst you will think, that must be a Willis, but not a Father Willis, because of all the sort of false teeth that are under the music desk, which are the couplers. And this is a historic photograph because it is actually the organ of Westminster Cathedral, East End console. So that there is a small Lewis organ at the East End to accompany the choir. But when I played there on this connected up the big organ at the back with the Lewis. And so therefore you played and you had a time lag of half a second. So it was such fun joining the two organs together. You could play the Saint-Saëns E flat thingy on two organs, but one hand, because the distance was just right to actually umcha. And so, it's great fun. You could just do it with one hand, perfect. Look at the technology, television screen. Goodness knows what they saw on it, but perhaps the altar. But this was the East End console, which is no more. So quite a historic photograph of that Willis console there. And the next. Oh, by the way, I was playing music by the looks of it. How strange. Now, we go behind the Iron Curtain. Life in the rest of Europe, which suddenly was pretty dire. This was Poland. I went 1985 This was before perestroika and the Berlin Wall coming down. I was asked to open the Bach Festival in Krakow, or Krakow, and a number of concerts were organized for my visit. And it was a marvelous visit that I was invited by the Roman Catholic Church, not by any other means. And thus I was able to get the necessary documentation to get into Poland. I remember getting out of the plane at Warsaw and being escorted, not with a guard of honor, but with a guard to stop any people running onto the plane, with two guards either side of me holding rifles or machine gun sort of type things. I'm not very into armaments. And so this was a wonderful time, and it was January in '85, the beginning of the Bach celebrations in 1985. So cold that words cannot describe the coldness, but the warmness of the people. And I was told when I went there to expect great hospitality, and I did, and not to refuse anything because it meant so much. And so this medallion, which is bronze, was given to me upon the opening of a new organ, which I didn't know I was going to be opening until I got to the church. And it was a fun day. I had breakfast in Krakow, and I was then driven to the first church where I was going to give a concert. I got there, and the priest said, we welcome you. We've been waiting for breakfast for you. Thank you. I said, but I would like to see the organ. Oh, there's a mass. You cannot, no. So I had my second breakfast. I then went into the church to see the organ, and there was another mass going on. Church absolutely crammed full of people, and was so full of condensation that all my glasses steamed up because I couldn't see a thing. Anybody thought that I was Longley going in there because I was clutching the walls, trying to find my way around. And so I eventually got up into the organ loft, and they said, right, the concert will start when the priest leaves now. And so I played, and so everybody was there. I never had a chance to do any practice. I looked at the stops in front of me, and the only way that gave me some idea of the Polish names of stops were the eights and fours and what was a mixture with five and things like this in Roman numerals. And so off went the concert, and that was good. After the concert, got downstairs, went into the presbytery. Wonderful, Nigel, come and have lunch. So lunch, there were some two nuns busying themselves in the kitchen. And so lunch, very, very good, very good. And so then I had another concert later on that day. And the priest at this place gave me my fee in dollars, and he put it in surreptitiously into my coat pocket so nobody would see, certainly the nuns and anybody about. This was 1985, and money was not in existence in Poland. So what happened was I left, and I was going to the next church, and he said, how are you getting there? And I said, well, I think so-and-so's taking me, but his car is broken down outside. Oh, he said, I will ask the parochial Mercedes to take you to the next church, which is this one, which you see on this medallion. And it was a church that had been dedicated by Pope John Paul, when he was Cardinal of Krakow. And so these medallions were dedicated when the church was, and I think it was 1974, as you can see, something down there, 79. And so I was there, and the parish priest was waiting for me on the steps, which you could see going up to the entrance. He was an enormous man. He's, but I know you've come, good. We've been waiting for lunch for you. Oh, and knowing that I mustn't say no, yet another lunch. Over lunch, he saw the program and he pointed to the first piece. He says, "Is this loud?" And I said, quite loud, quite loud. And then pointing to the next piece, he says, "Is this loud?" I thought, I think he wants it to be loud. So I said, "You'll hear everything in my program, everything. Why do you want it loud?" "Because we have been raising money for many years for this organ, and you are giving the first opening concert on it." "Ah, really?" I said. "Yes, and if you play soft music, they will look at me," and pointing to his enormous stomach, saying, "What have you done with our money?" And so I didn't let him down. So after the concert, we had dinner. So 2 breakfasts, 2 dinners, 2 lunches. Had dinner and then went back to Krakow in the car that had now been mended. And they said, "Thank goodness you're here. We've been waiting supper for you for dinner." So I had 2 meals, 3 meals twice, and 3 concerts. And what a jolly time. And I told you about hats and things. I had all this money, schlotti and such like, which I couldn't bring out of the country. So what did I do? I bought all the works of Szymanowski. I bought the recordings, I bought all the music. I then had to buy new luggage to put all the music in. And then I still got an enormous bundle of money, which was illegal to actually possess. So I went into a shop and I wanted a fur hat. So I bought a fur hat. And here it is. It's called nutria, or as the translation is, rat. It was very expensive and it was in a glass case and was waiting for some field marshal from Russia to buy it. Anyway, I smuggled it out of the country, a trouser leg, in my trousers, of course. And so that's how I got it out of this country. God, didn't I breathe a sigh of relief? It was a terrible experience to be there. And yes, brings back rather terrifying memories of being followed, and words can't describe it. But you can see it all in volume 13 of the biography. Back again in Poland. Now, as you can see, happy people. This was a few years ago, and this was in Katowice, where I was a visiting professor of the Szymanowski Academy, which is the main music academy in Poland. And they had some very beautiful organs and some very talented organists. And so, gosh, didn't we have grand times playing our Buxtehude and our French music and learning about so many things which had been not part of their life nor their libraries since the wall came down, which for many people wasn't a very long time ago. So they're my lovely people from Katowice, and such a jolly time. Next. Saint-Antoine-l'Abbé in Isère in the southeast of France. I made friends, strangely, with an organ builder. Well, I won't go into the details of that because that will take us on until Wednesday. But Saint-Antoine is where I have my house in France, because I went to the opening of the reconstructed organ here, which was by Bernard Haubertin. And it is a remarkable instrument which has been the inspiration, not from me, but from others who have played here, to have instruments built by this builder. And so this wonderful place, which is about 500 people, with the Alps and the Vercors in the distance, it's a magical place. And I took the summer school, which I founded in Huddersfield in the middle of the 1980s with Pete Kay, Nicholas Kynaston, Naji Hakim. And in 1993, it moved to St. Antoine because there was no instrument in this country, in England, for playing the French repertoire, early French repertoire. And so we went there and I fell in love with the place, and I should still be there. But alas, virus has kept me away and I haven't played the organ for 2.5 years. Sad time, like many people. And so the next part, let's move onwards. I'm going to listen to a little piece of music by a late 17th century person. I've recorded much on this organ, by Jacques Boivin. And Boivin was the first organist of Rouen Cathedral when the new organ went in. The other one was destroyed in a great gale and pushed the window onto the old organ, which the great composer Titulus played. And Boivin was the instrumental person in getting the new organ into the cathedral in Rouen. I play this little piece to you because you'll see that it is a basse de trompette, which means that the trumpet is played by the left hand and is like a baritone bass solo. But it is specifically given in the composition, in the suite by Boivin, that it is accompanied on the positive, which is the part of the organ behind the player, using a bourdon and a larigot. A usual sight in France. One of the expeditions of the Conservatoire. Note the slightly sort of English hat, but the more French bottle. This is French life in the Summer Organ Conservatoire. And what fun, what joys we all have. And of course, Dennis has been and enjoyed the largesse of the French place and the wonders and the calm and the beauty in which to make music. It's a very special place to my heart. And so, yes, I'll crack a bottle a little later. So, next. Yes. On the left, I have quite a number of people come to stay in the village because they want me to teach them as a class. And here on the left, you see my organ scholars from Oxford University a few years ago. The person on the left with a cross coming out of his head actually is Richard Moore, who's the assistant organist at Guildford at the moment, and actually played, I think, for one of the a wedding in St. Paul's Cathedral. I've forgotten which one it was. But yes, some of my illustrious Oxford students. And I took them on an expedition into the mountains to this monument that you see there, which is a tomb. And it was where Messiaen is buried. And it's round the other side of where I live in the mountains near Grenoble. And I didn't tell them where we were going. And we even went into the churchyard and we planted some flowers on the grave. Since then, his wife has died, Yvonne. And so she's buried now in the same place. And so therefore, that was a grand thing, because I love education and I like taking people and showing them and excites people. Then on the right-hand side here, there's a few faces that you might recognize. There's Dame Gillian. This was in Orléans when one year I had the summer academy in Orléans and Paris. And so Gillian came to teach on the staff. And in front of her is the great Avon Koeman, the great professor from the Netherlands, who unfortunately died quite a little time ago now from a heart attack on the Red Sea. But he is a person who I admired so much because of his scholarship. He spoke French like the French and loved teaching at the summer school, both here in Huddersfield, Oxford, and also in St. Antoine and Orléans, as you can see. That is David Stevens shaking hands with Dame Gillian. We were having dinner together. We always dine together in a very nice restaurant, everybody. And so that's David. And he was at Belfast Cathedral, went from Newcastle. Exactly where he is at the present time, I don't know. But no doubt someone will tell me. But lovely moments and so joyful to see these happy times with students in different parts of the world. And dear Avold, I miss you so much. And the next. The inside, the scene of much revelry. This is the Grand Salle in my house in St. Antoine, where, I'm sorry to say, the spiders are causing havoc at the present time, since I haven't been there since the 14th of March 2 years ago. So that's where we have much revelry in this house built in 1452, slightly earlier than Bach, and a lot of old fingering needed to be done in the polishing. So next, the courtyard of St. Antoine. No buses, no cars, the occasional tourist, just utter paradise. And to play the organ there, amazing. When I did the first recording there, Karin Jorgensen, who was my great, and still is my great friend in Denmark, recorded here. And we used to do it quite late at night. And strangely, G major, playing a chord of G major, one piece, was so pure in tune that it struck a chord with all the birds which were in these trees. And this chord just set them off. It was the end of a piece. And so the end of the piece just carried on with all this chirping going on outside. And she said, what are we going to do? I said, leave it. I said, that's St. Antoine. And it's still one of the, one of those glorious moments where, it's just part and parcel of the place. Trying to be exactly perfected in recording and editing. No, this is exactly what it is and what it was and such like. And thus, that beautiful place where the spiders are residing at the moment. So, next. Ah, now, this is a picture that I imagine hardly anybody has ever seen unless they've seen a photograph, which you're seeing now, which I took. And it is Our Lady. And this brings me to an invitation not to play, because I think it's a ghastly organ, really, ruined out of all times. But this is behind the organ in Notre Dame, and that is Notre Dame in the rose window behind the organ. And so the next one. This was me being Quasimodo with Esmeralda, who was one of the students on the summer organ course. And this was when I was asked by the organ builder to go and visit him. And we went up on the roof, and I thought I would be Quasi. And so a rather well-dressed one, I think, you know. So I thought you'd just enjoy that. Unfortunately, the whole place in utter shambles because of the fire. So a very touching couple of photographs. And the next one you'll see me on top of the organ case looking down, and you can see why people have added so much to this organ, because the organ doesn't get out into the building. One, it's so high up, and so they add all these sort of silly things sticking out called trumpets. And it's, well, it's not noise you want, it's the subtlety of beautiful sounds for me. Racket is not my name. And so it's so lovely to be asked to go round the organ by Eve. And so the next one here is the organ builder, Cognier. And here you can see the bottom of the bombard of the pedal, the 32-foot, but it wasn't quite 32-foot when it was first built. It only went down to bottom F. And these pipes, I believe, I took because they were the lowest pipes of the Clicquot organ, which was dating from just before the Revolution. And so when Cavaillé-Coll came and rebuilt the organ, not so long after it had been built, actually, he added to the bombard, which went down to bottom F as a ravalement, and completed the comfort to bottom C. It was interesting going around the instruments with him because the whole instrument was turned on its axis, which was, well, I won't go into that, but it was because it was all to do with Cavaillé-Coll having one of those consoles, which comes up next. Oh, no, it doesn't. The Barker lever mechanism, which is what makes a mechanical organ possible to be played. And it was the English man Barker who then invented this patent inspiratory machinery that allowed big organs to be played, and which Cavaillé-Coll actually made great use of. And so what you see here is the original mechanism of Cavaillé-Coll. And the next, this was the original console of Notre Dame, at which Louis Vienne died, or just nearby. But this was the console that was taken out by Pierre Cochereau. And this was the original one. And only 3 built like this for the organist fans here. There were 3 instruments built with this tiered console, and for the large amount of stops, and also for the keyboards. Now, when he built this organ, he turned it so that the player looked eastwards. And so the back of you was the organ, and you looked eastwards. And the reason why the organ had to be turned on its axis, because C is now at the bottom on the left. When the Cliquot organ was there, the console was in the middle underneath the central pipes. So C was on your left there. And so when this console was put in, C is still on the left, but the complete instrument was turned round so that all the mechanism works. Therefore, that was what was destroyed, but it's there in the museum now. And other things have been done to the organ, and more so when it goes back in after the fire and restoration. But that's interesting because the next picture shows you here me playing in Saint-Sulpice, which is one of the other organs, which has the tiras, the tiered stops, and a rather amazing sort of combination system, which is what Notre Dame had, and also the Sacré-Cœur, which is where the other console is, that looks like this. And so this was playing. Every time you have to play in Saint-Sulpice, you have so many people gathered around because they're all allowed upstairs. And so, you know, it doesn't put me off. In fact, it's really quite good because you can have a conversation in the loud bits. So that's not in Saint-Sulpice. On the right, there, of course, is the great organist of Saint-Sulpice, Daniel Allcoat. And I'd just given a concert in Brisbane, in Australia, and who should be there was Daniel Allcoat. He was on a concert tour, as was I. And so very strange meeting up with people. And so I don't know, this might be more Australian. I don't know, that could be a hat for that. So it's surprising the coincidences in life where time after time you meet up with people in most unexpected places. And there was Daniel, and a great, great friend, who was actually part of the Summer Organ Conservatoire. So wonderful to meet up there, such fun. And the next one. My other life as a diocesan organ advisor in the Anglican Church here in England. And so this was a meeting we had, and I organized it, and it was based in Coventry, as I am the organ advisor for the diocese in Coventry, and more recently also the advisor for the Lichfield diocese. And the people that you see here are really quite some nice fun faces that you could see, and a few cathedral organists then and not so then now. One person who is missing is Roy Massey, who refused to come because, dear Roy, because we were actually discussing during the conference electronic hybrid and other systems of organ building, and he said he wasn't going to touch it with a barge pole. So he didn't turn up for this conference, but he did for another one where where he had to play a digital organ. Just that was a wonderful moment. And he played the Hereford Hauptwerk version and turned to everybody and he says, "Nothing like." So that was it. So you can see some people. I think you've got on the very right, about 3 rows back, you see the one of the gentlemen who was, I think, the director of Harrison and Harrison's. At the very back is William Vicker, and at the very back on his right is David Knight, and all sorts of people. John Rowntree and John Budgeon, Andrew Fletcher, and there's Dudar from from Chichester. So that's my other life, and I love going round and seeing all these churches and organs and doing my bit for the Anglican Church. So next, This is me on the job, so to speak, being a diocesan organ advisor. This is the sort of things that we have to come across in our almost daily life, looking at churches and giving advice, and also sort of joining in with things, really. And so the one on the right has gone particularly viral, and really it has become almost a pandemic in parts of the world. And as much as I can, I try to buy the rights of that picture. However, the person who took it is no longer with us. And therefore you see what I consider to be a very unusual console. Lovely organ, but a sort of heap. So the next one. My friends, my life, my family. That is on the left, my house organ, which was a gift from the organ builder Urbertin, which he said he put on a lorry and turned up. Not the sort of thing that you expect, from Amazon or whatever, or when Prime, I don't know, Yodel comes. But anyway, it's my wonderful 2-manual practice organ with 2 stops, 2 8-foots, and the pedal constantly coupled. Absolutely a gem. And many students actually like to play this as opposed to have lessons on other instruments, because it is so refined. And then my 21st birthday present on the right-hand side, which is my Steinway C, and it's 100 years old next year, and I've had it for slightly half of its life, if not slightly more now. Oh no, I've had it more. So I've been the owner of this for the longest time of its life. And so they're my workhorses at home, where I do my bits and bobs and this and that and some teaching. And as I said, the piano is the tool of the trade, never just playing the organ. To play romantic music must first be on the piano. Phrasing, singing out, listening, beautiful. We'll never play César Franck on the organ without first playing it many times on the piano. So, next. Piano time. Yes, friends. Here, perhaps one of the greatest pianists in the background, I might add, playing the great fantasy of Schubert. That's Evgeny Kissin, the great Russian pianist. And this is in the same situation as the piece would have been used within the confines of a party and of a social salon gathering in Belgravia some years ago. And this picture, very touching, because to be playing on the same keyboard, let alone being in the same room as this god of the piano, is really quite extraordinary. But I still got that tie, actually. I wear it on Pentecost because it's pretty red and flaming. Dear Evgeny, wonderful, wonderful. If you've never come across him, shockers, look him up. Oh, amazing, amazing boy. So, next. Here's me as a pianist. This is in Oxford. How we're doing? Oh gosh, better hurry up. This is in Oxford in St. John's in a soirée, and it was a concert, all of improvisations. And this particular piece, I've just chosen as me as a pianist, and playing in the same situation as a salon in the great gallery, long gallery of the President's House in St. John's College. And so this was his final goodbye as president after 10 years, Sir Michael Scholar, who had bought 3 Aubertin organs for the college. It had more instruments than the Royal Academy had. So this wonderful man, who's still with us, a wonderful organist, but he was president and the equivalent of Sir Humphrey Appleby in the government when he was in the government, but a wonderful man, Sir Michael Scholar. This was at his final soirée, and so he's a lovely pianist as well as an organist. And so here's something Brahms-esque, which you might enjoy. Gentle piece, and I'm certain it's Brahms, because at the top in literal translation it says, for Clara, but don't tell Robert. So, I don't know, and it's not really a shopping list, but anyway, this is a very charming little piece by Brahms, when he was, I suppose, young and infatuated. It's not much of it. Ah, yes, from whence I come. My father on the left, in our run around, 1904 Rover. I loved it because even before I knew about chamade trumpets, I loved it because it had one of those horns you could pap. And so, yeah, wherever we went, they knew that we were coming. You can see it just on his right arm. He's got his hand on the steering wheel, which sometimes worked, and just there on his elbow is the thing that I used. It was great fun, and you got in through a door at the back, and you sat opposite each other. And the family used to loan it out for fetes and things, and surprising. And it's in the museum, I think, in Gaydon. It went to auction when we were hard up, and it went to auction, and well, it just paid a bit of the huge death duties and things. But anyway, there it is. And my mother's on the right. That's her 100th birthday. Gosh. Yeah, she, you know, if I've got her genes still, I'll be doing this in 50 years' time. That was her 100th birthday. She went to 101, and her faculties and brain, and everything was wonderful. My father was in the industry of Hinckley, which was clothes, and my mother just wore them. And she loved hats more than anything else, and was never seen in church without one. And she wore a very big hat once to St. John the Evangelist, Duncan Terrace in London, the Roman Catholic Church, when Basil Hume went to the anniversary of the church's foundation. And my mother wore a hat which was so big it was like where a helicopter could land. Anyway, she looked up at him, because she was quite a petite lady. She looked up at the cardinal, who was quite tall, and said, "I'm in love with you." And he then went and ducked and went under the helicopter pad. And we still don't know what she said, but oh gosh, didn't she giggle for the rest of the night? Bless her. She only died a few years ago. Yes, had it not been for her tenacity, she was told on the 12th of October to go to bed to save me. She got up for Christmas morning, and then I was born on the 15th of March, the day Caesar died, but not in the same year. And so her tenacity, and that's why I looked after her for so long. I wouldn't have had my glorious life, which I've tried to share with you all here. Its ups and downs and its vagaries. And so these were the people that supported me. And my father, who almost bought Italy because I lived an extravagant life in Rome. And my mother, who supported my father in saying, you know, it's a bit like Hyacinth. How much does he want this time? And so, yes, had he not been, because being a musician and doing what I did does not come cheap. And so, great thanks to them. Lovely to see them. And so that's the Old Faithful, as it was called. My father was driving. Yeah, Tesco car park has never been the same. So what's next? The end. The end, yes. I compose, or some say decompose, but I compose enormous amounts. Much was actually lost in a fire one summer holiday in Milton Abbey, all very early manuscripts and things. And so it rather knocked me back in life. I wasn't particularly on an even keel, should we say, following that, because it was like getting rid of your family and lots of music and things. But this I resurrected because I wrote this originally when I was 22, and at my first job in Bromsgrove School in Worcestershire. And I had a lovely, lovely boys' choir, which was drawn from the prep school part. And we sang, and I was really for them. And then much, much later on, I found an old photocopy of this. And so I transcribed it again in Sibelius. And I tweaked just a little, and it was then sung. John Scott, dear John, wanted to do it at St. Paul's, and we all went down from the village here in a charabanc or two, had tea at the Waldorf, and then on to Evensong to hear John and his exceptional boys sing this. Tears, oh, tears for me. I couldn't move in the nave, having heard the rehearsal. Then the vergers let people up into the choir, and I just sat there riveted to think that, oh dear, it's so emotive, to think that something that comes out of here should be sung in such a place and by such consummate musicians, that someone had to rush down and collect me, and the verger says, "No, we're full." "No, but he's got to come up." And so had it not been for somebody, I wouldn't have got up into the choir stalls to hear this. Anyway, you're going to just hear the Nunc Dimittis because I could think of nothing nicer to finish with. And I thank you for joining me in such a memorable little moment. Cheers.
Well, Nigel, on behalf of us all, thank you very, very much for a hugely enjoyable and entertaining presentation tonight. And what a fascinating journey from such an early age of 9 to wanting to play the organ at Westminster Abbey. I think it just goes to show that we need to encourage young talent as soon as it shows an interest in the instrument. And we all need to do that. I was also very much taken by your reflections on the visit to Alkmaar and Haarlem, which indeed we had an NDSO trip, a continental trip in the mid-1970s to both of those venues, and I certainly felt exactly the same on seeing them for the first time. On a lighter note, I think the illustrative headgear for the various visits is perhaps a first for NDS.
Oh yes. Well, just as an aside, I was asked to be part of what is William Whitehead's Orgelbuchlein project, which was published by Peter's edition, and I was asked to do a chorale for the publication. And so I shall wear my London hat for when this was published and was given in Westminster Abbey. So this turns us full circle from those early 9-year days. And so this is what I wore to Westminster Abbey for the great publication. So, very Victoria Street.
And very sartorial, if I may say so.
Well, I take after my parents. my father was in knickers, and my mother loved clothes. And yes, and when I was at the RSCM, they had a big garden festival and a bring and buy and everything like this to raise money for something. My father said to Gerald Knight, I said, well, can I help? And he said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I can send some things down for you to sell. What sort of things? Underwear, my father said, which gave Gerald somewhat of an odd expression. Anyway, my father did send all this stuff down. And when it arrived, some wags, fellow students, they put notices all the way up Addington Drive on the trees saying, "Visit Nigel's Knickery Nook." And so I helped the RSCM in their underwear. Gerald did actually say, would your father actually be able to put the crest on underpants? I think he was joking. Well, I hope he was, because my father wasn't going to applique on underpants the RSCM crest, because it would be hidden all the time. And therefore, yeah, that was fun, fun days and fun times. And I was, you know, so well, I still am. I still joke, and I see the funny side of life. And I know that you wanted me to say just something about Russia. Well, I can say it now, because, you know, it's difficult when you're saying something difficult about people and countries. But when I first went to Russia to teach and to perform, I gave the first performance of my 24 etude in the Philharmonic Hall in St. Petersburg. It is the oldest concert hall as a concert hall in the world, and a great honor to be there. And there was a great difficulty with me getting to St. Petersburg, because I was going to Ekaterinburg first of all, but the visas and everything didn't come through. And so I only could get to St. Petersburg, not via Moscow. So British Airways dealt with my tickets. However, when I was leaving St. Petersburg, it was impossible to get out, because my ticket said Moscow, and the British Airways office was outside the international part of the airport for some reason. And so I had to keep going to the British Airways to try and sort out my return ticket. And eventually, my luggage had already gone through, but then the ticket went to, I don't know, sort of Ivana, who was behind, looking terribly, and so in the check-in. And then I had to go back into the airport about 3 times from the British Airways office. And on the 3rd time, I was arrested. The reason for this, as a translator told me, is that they believed that I was money laundering. This is when I had the great misfortune to think that the Russians had humor, but there was none, because I had a Kalashnikov pushed up the back of my coat and marched off. The only reason how I got out of the country, they just didn't believe me. So what I have here, which I found this morning amidst a pile, is this. Now, you can see it's Russian. This is the program from the Philharmonic Hall, and the only way I got out was to push this in front of them with my photograph. And for those that you want to know, that is my name in Russian. It sounds like that as well. So that's the only way. My passport was of no use, but the Philharmonic Hall program, which is worth darn sight more than a passport, got me back home. Wasn't I relieved? So, found us this morning. I know.
Anyway, thank you so much, and I'm sure everyone would like to join me in another round of virtual applause for Nigel.